Before we get started, a brief rundown on how each case will be handled. We'll have staff present cases to us one by one. We'll have an opportunity to ask them questions before we invite the applicant up if there's other details they'd like to share with us. Then we will do a public hearing. After the public hearing, the applicant will be invited back up to respond to anything that was raised during public hearing. We'll then have a chance to ask any final questions before we deliberate and make a decision and move on to our next case. We will have a public hearing for each of the cases individually, so I'll announce that at the appropriate time. Before we get started with our first case, Commissioners, any conflicts of interest or potential conflicts on today's cases?
I have a conflict of interest on 5D, 2706 and 2750 Burton Southeast. I am a parishioner, and my children attend the school at St. Paul.
I would move that the commissioner has a conflict of interest.
Support.
All right, we have a motion and support. Any discussion on that? All those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, any other conflicts? Okay, then we can get started with our first case, 846 Cesar E. Chavez Ave Southeast.
Elizabeth, is your microphone on?
It is. Hello? We're good? Okay.
I still can't hear you very well, though.
Would you mind going to?
I turned it on
Travis?
here. It's on now, but
Check.
that's better. Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. 846 Cesar Chavez is a request for approval to establish an event venue banquet hall that will include alcohol sales, indoor live entertainment, and outdoor seating. And this is in the TNTBA zone district where this use requires special land use approval. The applicant is also requesting a parking reduction. The applicant owns or controls a series of buildings, including the 846 building on Cesar Chavez. They also own the parking lot across the street on the west side that is intended to be used to support this use. It's my understanding that the applicant will be paving and improving that parking lot to meet current code requirements. This slide is showing you the properties in question. On the left side of the screen is the parking lot, and the area to be used for the banquet facility is what I'm pointing to on the screen. This is the proposed parking lot, and this is a site plan of the banquet facility. Here is an older from February screenshot from Google Maps. The applicant is currently in this building on the right, I understand, and it's the building on the left that the applicant is proposing to use for the banquet facility. You can see that in this slide as well. This slide shows you how is a rendering of what is anticipated that the facility will look like when complete. There will be a cover, a canopy constructed over the outdoor area, as well as some low fencing installed. The banquet area will have a floor area of approximately 2,300 square feet and an occupancy of about 145 persons. Relative to the outdoor space, which will be the area shown on this part of the slide. The rental agreement indicates that alcohol is only permitted inside the fenced area if served by I think I wrote that incorrectly. Alcohol may only be consumed within the fenced area and needs to be served by a licensed caterer. Events in the banquet facility are to cease and the facility vacated by midnight, Monday through Saturday, and 10 p.m. on Sunday. Outdoor activities will end by 10 p.m. Monday through Saturday and 8 p.m. on Sunday. A private event contract has been submitted, although I would like to ask for a more robust alcohol management plan, and that is definitely something that staff can work with the applicant on, and I've included that as a recommended condition of approval. I've also added in the condition of approval some of the additional conditions that we've typically been adding recently for banquet facilities. And those are intended to keep the banquet facilities from becoming burdensome on the surrounding neighborhood. So relative to one other thing I wanted to add about the outdoor space. They are not proposing entertainment outdoors, but they are proposing the outdoor space as a pre-event gathering space, and I'll defer to the applicant to provide additional detail on that. Relative to parking, there is, no on-site parking, and the applicant is proposing to construct the parking lot across the street. Typically, a parking lot in a residential zone district would require planning commission approval, but this has been an established parking lot, and it has non-conforming rights to be used as a parking lot. And so they have rights for that use, and they'll be obtaining permits for the paving and landscaping. For an occupancy of 145, 37 parking spaces are required. 22 parking spaces are proposed in this lot, and so there's a deficit of 15 spaces. And the deficit can be addressed by the availability of public transportation and on-street parking. So that is part of the Planning Commission's consideration today. No written summary of the applicant's neighborhood outreach has been provided, so I'll defer to the applicant to talk about their outreach activities. So in sum, we're looking at a banquet facility of up to 145 people in a TN-TBA zone district. It will include alcohol service, indoor live entertainment, and an outdoor gathering space. A parking reduction is also requested. Do you have any questions for me?
Thanks, Elizabeth. Commissioners, any questions? All right, thanks. I'll invite the applicant up if there's additional details you want to share with us.
Hello. Are there questions specifically first, or would you like me to address the things that Elizabeth mentioned?
You can go ahead and address those, and then we'll ask. Thanks.
Sure. The on-street parking and the deficit parking was definitely something we worked through. We have a church located just south of us, and they have a parking lot, and we have a great relationship with them. And since our timing for things don't usually coincide, they usually use things when we do not use them and whatnot, that will also make up for some of that deficit as sort of our shared agreement that they use a lot of our space on Sunday mornings as well. So that partnership will assist in some of that And then there's additional street parking that will continue to come in the redevelopment of Cesar Chavez, which is happening in 2023 and 2024. So I believe both those things would play a role. And then I also serve within the Granville Area Business Association, which is the neighborhood association for that space. So they are very familiar with and excited about what we are bringing to this neighborhood. The Roosevelt Park Association is also the other sort of like acting body in that community. They're also aware I'm doing a formal presentation to them post the SLU approval that we're hoping for today, but they are aware and excited about it. So we've also been in touch with both of those organizations.
Is that agreement you have with the church kind of formalized, or is it just?
Definitely has not been formalized in any sort of written way. I did mention in passing, hey, I might need to ask us to make this formal, and so they know that that question might be coming if that was something that you were seeking. But in the years that we've been in this space, we've very easily shared the space and not had any trouble.
Gotcha. Thanks.
Yep.
Can you talk about your hours of operation, especially relative to the staging area at the back of the facility, with knowing that there's houses right across the back there?
Absolutely, absolutely. So the current plan that is in place is that there is a garage space that is a oversized double garage that's all connected at the moment. And our proposed plan puts a wall up to keep half of it as garage space that we would be using. And then the other half would become that catering prep space. Within that, there would still be a garage door that would open to the alley space behind on that side, purely for ease of a catering company to load in and out, that could open up, they could have their truck, they could unload into that space, and then they could close the door again. So the idea is that they can be fully self-contained within a closed space. It's just simply a garage door because of the ease of access for unloading things from a catering perspective.
And then what about the hours of operation?
Oh, sure, sorry. In terms of the hours of operation, we made sure that we would be complying with anything from a city ordinance perspective. As a whole, I believe that our facility will be sought out for corporate and nonprofit things during the week, which would mostly be during business hours. And then weddings typically are more so a Friday or Saturday evening. Our intention would be to limit the patio space, that there could not be anything from a music perspective and loud noise going on outside of that space after 10 p.m. And then the entire facility, as Elizabeth noted, vacated by midnight on a Friday or Saturday. So that would be the limit in terms of that time. And then we would make sure that the caterers have a hard out time of that back space that aligns with that as well.
Any other questions, commissioners? All right, thank you.
Yep.
I'll open up the public hearing. If you're here today about this case, please come forward, state your name, and share your brief thoughts with us. All right, seeing no one coming forward, I'll close the public hearing and turn to commissioners, see if there are other questions or discussion on this.
I think it's a good use of the space. I want to acknowledge the absence of a formal parking agreement, and that I would be supportive of the waiver based on the existing formal conditions around off-street parking and public transportation. So appreciate the applicant being transparent about her relationship with the church, but my approval would be based, and the waiver would be based on the existing conditions and the absence of that. But otherwise, I think the use is appropriate. The time, especially for outdoor use, seems aligned with the activity on Cesar Chavez Street already. So I'm very supportive.
Yeah, I agree, and I think the hours of operation are appropriate. I appreciate the kind of earlier times for outdoor activities based on the residential that's in the area, but I also like that there are some houses across the street, but I like that the outdoor area is kind of surrounded by buildings, so the sound will be insulated that way, and I'm very supportive of the use as well. I do see some kind of planter boxes in the rendering, and I'm trying to recall if there was any. I know that there isn't anything green on the site right now, and so this will be a really nice improvement, but I'm wondering if, yeah, I just hope that that happens. It would be nice to have some beautification related to plantings.
I mean, if you feel that to help make it appropriate for the outdoor seating and the hours that they're proposing, that some additional separation is necessary and that the landscape planters provide that, then you can link the necessity of the planters to the use itself.
Do other commissioners think that that is a necessary conditional approval, or that?
I mean, I think they're beautiful, but I think the amount of activity on the street that they're really buffering against is so robust. It doesn't, I mean, it's beautiful, but I don't think it's really going to dampen sound or anything. I think if there was
Yeah.
a use to the south that we were trying to protect, I might feel more
Sure.
the need for that, but.
Yeah, go ahead.
Is it okay if I know there wasn't an official question, but just because it's absolutely a component that we think would enhance the space as well. So the planters that are here, yes, our intention is to have these here as a component of that edging, so to speak. If on the photo that's up there, I will say one of the pieces that is probably not fully developed on the photo quite as much, but the third building that is part of these three connected pieces, which would be to the left of that of the patio space. We are intending, where right now it just looks like little red and white dots on there, but our intention of that when we put in the border on building 3 is that that becomes like large scale planter boxes all the way around, so that essentially between what is considered building 2, which is the center building, and building 3, that there will be a wall that has a lot more greenery. And then essentially the corner that you can't see in this photo, like if you turn to your left when you're looking at this photo, this would no longer be like a parking area that people would be pulling into. So our intention is that that corner is going to help contribute to the green space that would be required. Part of what has been happening within this process is that we've already applied for merging all 3 parcels into one, which is a way that we're putting all of that green space to use. So while we're doing some things in the back alley, such as porous concrete and things of that nature that help contribute to the area from just the visual perspective, our intention is to build up that front corner as green space as well, which is obviously a benefit all the way around, but we also would love that component to be able to kind of give that block a little bit more and allow a green area, not just building. So that is part of the intention, even though I realize it's not like a formal requirement, so to speak.
Cool, thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. I don't think it needs to be a condition of approval, but, yeah.
I also support this project. I like the idea that the outdoor space faces the main street. It will add an activity. I think paving the parking lot across the street will create a more professional and look. I'm assuming that we have landscaping requirements for the parking lot across the street as well, so.
I am willing to make a motion if no one else has anything to say. Unless you want to. Okay. All right. Now therefore be it resolved that the Planning Commission approves the special land use request of Special Occasions Jamie Carnes to establish an event venue banquet hall with indoor live entertainment, alcohol service, and outdoor seating at 846 Cesar E. Chavez Avenue Southwest, formerly Granville Avenue, for the following reasons. The proposed use will be consistent with the purpose and intent of the master plan and zoning ordinance, including the zone district, because the proposed use will increase the mix of uses in a commercial area, and the Granville Avenue area specific plan recognizes the need for active ground floor uses, retail, office, service, and residential uses. The proposed use will meet the site plan review standards of section 5.12.08.e because the building is existing and substantially conforms with the TNTBA site layout and building element requirements, and the site will be brought closer to conformity with current site requirements. The proposed use will be compatible, harmonious, and appropriate with the character and uses of the neighborhood because the proposed use will be consistent with the desired mixed-use nature of the neighborhood and will provide a desired amenity in the neighborhood. Potentially adverse effects arising from the proposed use will be minimized because the operator or their designee will be on the premises during events, and the use will be oriented toward the street. The proposed uses will not be detrimental, hazardous, or disturbing to existing or future uses or to the public welfare by reason of excessive traffic, noise, and glare, because events will cease by midnight Monday through Saturday and 10 p.m. Sunday, and entertainment will be fully contained indoors. The proposed use will not adversely affect the walkability of the neighborhood, impair pedestrian circulation patterns, disrupt the continuity of the urban street wall, or otherwise hinder the creation of a pedestrian-oriented environment, because the use of the building as proposed could bring additional pedestrian traffic to this area of the neighborhood, and the establishment of the outdoor area will result in additional vitality in the district. The proposed use will not be detrimental to the financial stability and economic welfare of the city, because the conditions of special land use approval will limit nuisances that require police or code enforcement actions. Given the character, location, development trends, and other aspects of the neighborhood, it is demonstrated that the area is underserved by the proposed use, and that the proposed location for alcohol sales will demonstrably be an asset to the neighborhood, because there are no other such facilities in the immediate vicinity. The use or change in use as constructed and operated by the applicant is compatible with the neighborhood, because the use is located on Cesar Chavez Avenue, a main commercial corridor where such uses are appropriate, and neighbors have not expressed opposition to the proposed use. Adjacent or nearby parks, playgrounds, religious institutions, or schools will not be adversely affected, because there will be no sale of alcohol for off-site consumption. The use as proposed to be operated by the applicant will not have any or minimal negative secondary effects on the neighborhood, because the applicant has procedures prepared so that the use will be operated in a manner that has the potential to minimize or eliminate negative secondary effects on the neighborhood. Be it further resolved that the following conditions of approval shall apply to this project. Standard conditions that A, approvals, which I will read now, that the application and plans submitted by the applicant and signed and dated and stamped by the planning director shall constitute the approved plans, except if plan elements do not meet ordinance requirements and are as amended in this resolution. That the use shall operate according to the application and per applicant testimony as recorded in the planning commission minutes. That this approval does not include any proposed signs, and any future signs shall be subject to the requirements of Article 15 of the ordinance and permits received prior to installation. That a land use development services or LUDS permit, building permit, and all other required permits be obtained from the city of Grand Rapids prior to construction, demolition, or operation. That any expansion of the approved special land use requires an additional special land use review and approval by the planning commission. That the proposed use will comply with all other applicable city ordinances and policies and all state laws. That this approval shall take effect 16 calendar days after the date of the planning commission decision. 2, that events shall cease and the facility vacated by midnight Monday through Saturday and 10 p.m. Sunday. 3, the outdoor seating will end by 10 p.m. Monday through Saturday and 8 p.m. on Sunday. 4, that music and dancing incidental to a private event may be permitted, but there shall be no events or ticket sales to the general public at which admission is charged at the door. 5, that there shall be no live entertainment outdoors, and amplified ambient music shall not exceed conversational level. 6, that the operator or their designee shall be on the premises during all events. 7, that the event space may accommodate up to 145 individuals, subject to occupancy determination by the city's building official and applicable building and fire codes. 8, that a noise analysis shall be conducted by a qualified engineer, and if necessary, the building shall be soundproof to meet the requirements of the Noise Control Ordinance, Chapter 151, Article 5 of the City Code. 9, that doors and windows shall remain closed when indoor music and entertainment occurs. 10, that a comprehensive alcohol management plan shall be submitted prior to the issuance of a LUDS permit. 11, that the rental agreement shall be amended to include stipulations that no alcohol may be consumed in the parking lot. There will be no congregating in the parking lot to mitigate noise on the neighbors, and parking in adjacent residential neighborhoods shall be discouraged. 12, that an indoor event license shall be obtained from the office of the city clerk.
Support.
All right, we have a motion and support. Any final discussion? All those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, the motion passes. Thank you. Our next case is 320 Coldbrook Street Northeast.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. So the applicant and property owner of 320 Coldbrook Street Northeast is seeking approval to construct an addition to an existing single-family home to create a new attached single-family dwelling. essentially rendering this a duplex. So construction of a two-family home that is not on a corner lot does require special land use in the TN LDR zone district, which this parcel is located. And as you can see, the immediate vicinity is also TN LDR with various commercial and special districts surrounding that. Based on the future land use map of the master plan, this area here is where the property is located, which is designated as medium low-density residential. This map is from the Belknap area-specific plan, which this property is associated with. And this identifies the property as traditional family housing, which includes single-family, duplex, and triplex housing. The underlying intent of this district is to maintain the overall scale and character of the residential fabric of the neighborhood, but also importantly that new infill construction is required to be compatible with the surrounding homes in terms of form, size, scale, proportions, materials, etc. This is an image taken recently showing the current conditions of the site. The extent of work on this property involves construction of the new home directly west of the current home here. Along with that, the applicant intends to remove the existing garage located here on your screen. And no new driveways or curb cuts are proposed to ensure that they're maintaining both the front yard and the existing sidewalks. According to the zoning ordinance, two-family dwellings have to have a lot area and lot width of at least 30% larger than the median average of those nearby. And this lot exceeds both of those requirements by more than 30%. As you can see, the general average in this area was a little over 4,700 square feet. And that would mean that just over 6,200 square feet would be required. This property is over 9,500 square feet, so it's well above the limit. Let's see, and this slide shows the adjacent property lot widths and building lines. The applicant has indicated that the median building line was 23.5 feet. The zoning ordinance requires that the new structure be built at or around that line, which they are proposing 24 feet from the front curb. Planning staff has reviewed this proposed building line, and we did determine that it's appropriate and that it brings the site closer in conformity with the rest of the neighborhood. But if needed, an administrative departure of up to 10 feet of the established required building line may be permitted to accommodate a difference in placement. Let's go to, we'll go here. So architecturally, the intent of the proposed addition is consistent with the existing house, as well as the neighborhood, as I mentioned, utilizing the same building materials and roof on the house. And the applicant has indicated that this will essentially be an exact replica of the existing structure that's there. So in terms of what it looks like on the outside, the floor plan, storage in the basement, those will all be exactly the same. We weren't provided necessarily with elevations. However, we do have a front elevation shown here, and as you can see, they're doing their best to replicate the existing home. And although there's no specific floor plan labels, they do indicate that 2 bedrooms and 1 bathroom would be designed for this property. As I mentioned before, the existing garage, which used to be located here, will be removed, and that will facilitate the placement of 3 new parking spaces that are striped. This property does have access from an alleyway here to the south, and that is how vehicles will be approaching this parking area. There is also an indication of appropriate fencing and landscape buffering between the adjacent residential uses to buffer and screen the parking section. And does anyone have any questions?
I may have read it, but I've forgotten it. Are these owned or rented?
They're rented, and the applicant did indicate that they had conversations with the current tenant in the existing home, and she was supportive of the new development.
Was there any discussion on just building a new house next to it? Is the lot, would it configure appropriately to meet the requirements of zoning to do that, or?
It would not, which is exactly why they're proposing having it be attached.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions for staff at this time? All right, thanks. I'll invite the applicant up if there's anything else you'd like to share with us.
Do you have any questions, or should I?
Go ahead, you can state your name for the record, that'd help us out, and then if there's anything you want to share with us, you can do that, and then we'll ask questions after.
My name's Tony Brownell. I'm the owner of the property. I guess a couple of things that I saw may or may not be requested in the informational packet was neighborhood outreach. I did try to contact 15 addresses on the street. I got 6 responses, and almost all of them, the answer to my question was, do you have an opinion on this? And I showed them the flyer that was mailed, answered not really or no. And I think one of them probably said it best, said, I really don't have any opinion, it's just an empty lot they want to put a duplex on. I guess the other pertinent piece of information is the current rent is about 30% undervalued. I don't have a reason to change that, so the other one would likely fall in line about the same. That's in line with my business model. And the last thing was, I do have an approval from the Belknap neighborhood. Their only comment was they'd like to see more of a porch. So I think that's somewhat of a question of zoning. I told them that's certainly within the realm of possibility.
All right, thanks. Commissioners, any questions for the applicant? All right, thank you. I'll open up the public hearing. If you're here today about this case on Coldbrook, please come forward and state your name and share your thoughts with us.
Good afternoon. My name is Eliana Boots, and I'm the Executive Director of Neighbors of Belknap Lookout, and we were really pleased to have a great conversation with Tony on Monday morning with our Community Development Committee. We recently developed a scorecard based on values in the ASP to let developments know what our expectations are, and this was a great opportunity to test it out and to see how we need to modify our expectations for smaller developments. So that's going to give us some improvements that we can make in the future. And again, we had really excellent conversation. We're excited to see this duplex come in, including one of the board members who signed off on the support, just lives a block away. So yeah, we're excited to see the duplex. We'd love to have a little bit bigger porch, and happy to have it go.
All right, thanks. Anyone else on this case? All right, I'll close the public hearing. Commissioners, any follow-up questions? Piece of cake.
Yeah, I think this is completely appropriate. Obviously, it doesn't matter to us whether it's renter or owner or what the rent is. We just need to focus on the land use, but I think it's completely appropriate here and fits in well with the character of the neighborhood. I don't think it's necessary to require a bigger porch. I think that what they have there falls in line with what's in the surrounding area, but obviously more porches is better, so that's up to the applicant. So, but yeah, I'm in complete support.
I can make a motion. There's no other discussion.
All right, that works for me. Thanks.
Whereas Spaken Investments LLC, Tony Brownell, has requested special land use approval to construct an addition to an existing single-family home to create a new two-family dwelling at 320 Coldbrook Street Northeast. And whereas the proposed use is subject to the requirements for residential districts, Article 5, attached single-family and two-family dwellings, Section 5.9.06, Site Plan Review, Section 5.12.08, and Special Land Uses, Section 5.12.09. And whereas the Planning Commission held a public hearing on July 14th, at which time all interested persons had an opportunity to be heard, and whereas the Planning Commission has considered the applicable zoning ordinance standards. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the Planning Commission approves a special land use request of Spaken Investments LLC, Tony Brownell, to construct an addition to the existing single-family home to create a two-family dwelling at 320 Coldbrook Street Northeast for the following reasons. The proposed use will be consistent with the purpose and intent of the master plan and zoning ordinance, including the zone district, because the proposed use will increase the number and variety of housing units within the city, supports the Belknap Neighborhood Area Specific Plan by introducing new housing in ways that are consistent with the existing neighborhood while addressing the needs of different life stages. 2, the proposed use will meet the site plan review standards of Section 5.12.08.E because the site has been harmoniously and efficiently organized in relation to the size and type of lot, character of the neighborhood, and adjoining structure. The proposed building is appropriately aligned with the required building line, RBL, of the surrounding block. The proposed use will be compatible, harmonious, and appropriate with the character and uses of the neighborhood, adjacent properties, and the natural environment because the proposed building is consistent in scale and orientation with what is desired in the TN neighborhood classification, and the proposed use will result in a density appropriate for this area of the neighborhood. The proposed use will not have adverse effects on the neighborhood because the building and entrances are appropriately oriented on the street. The required number of parking spaces will meet the requirement of the zone district. The proposed off-street parking area is provided with attention to the effects of noise and glare on adjacent properties by incorporating appropriate buffering and screening. The proposed use will not be detrimental, hazardous, or disturbing to existing or future uses or to the public welfare by reason of excessive traffic, noise, or visual clutter, because adequate setbacks will be provided to abutting residential uses. Vehicular access will be taken from the alley, and the building is appropriately designed and oriented to be compatible with the adjoining structure. The proposed use would not adversely affect the walkability of the neighborhood, impair pedestrian circulation patterns, disrupt continuity of the urban street wall, or otherwise hinder the creation of a pedestrian-oriented environment, because the proposed building will be placed near the median RBL, reestablishing the street wall, and the placement of the house entrances and rear yard parking reflects a pedestrian-oriented site. The proposed development will retain as many natural features of the landscape as practicable because the proposal will incorporate additional landscaping to mediate the loss of green space on the lot and improve the natural environment of the property. Adequate public or private infrastructure and services already exist or would be provided at no additional cost and will safeguard the health, safety, and general welfare of the public because the applicant will be responsible for the construction of any new infrastructure necessary for the development. The proposed use would not be detrimental to the financial stability and economic welfare of the city because the additional units contribute to the tax base. Be it further resolved that the following conditions of approval shall apply to this project. Standard condition set A on the screen.
Support.
All right, we have a motion and support. Any discussion? All right, all those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, the motion passes. Thank you. Our next case is 2340 28th Street Southeast.
The next item is a, the next item is a request for an approval to sell wine, beer, and distilled spirits for off-site consumption in association with a proposed convenience store. The subject property and alcohol sales requires special land use approval. The subject property is located in an MONC zone district, modern era commercial zone district. It is at the intersection of Breton and 28th Street. The subject property was formerly occupied by Israel's Home Furnishings, windows and floor coverings. You can see a Google Street View photo here. It's a building with a substantial amount of windows on all sides except the south side, which is the service side. The building exceeds the 30% front transparency and 15% side transparency. The property, let's see here, this brown brick building on the current slide was also an Israel's building, and these two buildings operated as a single site. There is a shared access on 28th Street, and there's also a shared, it was one lot at one time, and there is a shared sign program that was granted through variance that this property will be subject to. The site is about 23,000 square feet in area. The building is about 5,000 square feet. And it has a parking lot of about 26 spaces. As you could see in the photos, as well as on this site plan, there really is there's no landscaping or trees to speak of. There is an existing street tree along Breton, and there's a small landscape planter near the street. If the Planning Commission is amenable, and I should mention that at the time this was developed, we didn't have the same standards that we do today for parking lot screening and landscaping. But if the Planning Commission is amenable to this, we would ask that you condition approval on bringing the site closer to conformity with the landscaping elements that is in the recommended conditions of approval, along with a trash enclosure. There doesn't seem to be a trash enclosure on the site, and we'd also like to see the lighting brought into conformity. Some of the heads are angled, and we no longer allow that. I should mention there's also I don't know if it's permanent, and I don't know if you can see it in any of these slides. There is there seems to be a kind of permanent container on the site. I don't know the nature of it. It's in all the aerial photos going back years, but I think I'd like to ask about that, and that likely should be moved if this is approved. Though that type of storage in a container was never a permitted type of storage. So relative to the operation, the applicant proposes that the store be open until midnight, Sunday through Thursday, and 2 a.m. Friday and Saturday. There is a cash register viewing window or I should say, the cash register will be visible from outside as is required by the zoning ordinance. The plan has also been reviewed by our SEPTED specialist as well, and the applicant is aware of the SEPTED ordinance and has addressed those elements in his application. One thing I'd like to mention is the floor plan. The applicant is proposing a walk-in cooler, a beer cave, on the, I guess it's the east elevation. And as you can see on this slide, it's along the wall in front of several windows. I hope I didn't remove that slide, or that, oh goodness. It's in your packet. I don't seem to have it in this in the slideshow, but in your packet, you can see that the applicant is proposing a walk-in cooler with some windows. And that would, you could see into the walk-in cooler, you could see the product, but you could also see you could tell that there's a cooler in front of the window. So I'd like to ask the Planning Commission to consider this proposed arrangement to determine if it's appropriate. I might encourage the Planning Commission to discuss the option of, if you find that this layout is appropriate, covering those windows with spandrel glass. There is a significant amount of transparency. The building requires 30%. It might be a little bit less on the on that eastern side, but I think it would likely improve the appearance. It would be less cluttered looking if those windows were covered. Another alternative is a different floor layout arrangement. It looks like there's a staircase to the basement on the other side, so I don't know that the walk-in cooler of this size could just be moved over there. I'll defer to the applicant to talk about some of those things. So that is an element that I would ask that the Planning Commission consider. Finally, I'd like to mention that there are a couple of other alcohol uses in the vicinity, or rather package alcohol sales. We have gas stations on two of the other street corners, which both do sell wine and beer for off-site consumption. I would like to point out that in those cases, the sale of wine and beer is accessory to the gas station and convenience store sales. In this case, I think this is a liquor store. The primary use is the sale of alcohol. So the Planning Commission may wish to, weigh those issues. In addition, to the east is B&B Liquors, which is an existing liquor store. The applicant has indicated that he will be purchasing that store and closing it. However, I'm not sure if that's something we can require. So there could be another liquor store in close proximity. The applicant has indicated that he's conducted outreach with surrounding businesses. There's not really an active neighborhood association or business association here, and I've not received any letters of support or opposition to date. So in sum, we're looking at an establishment that sells wine, beer, and distilled spirits as a primary use, and specific elements of consideration are extent to which the site should be brought into compliance with the green site elements and lighting, appropriateness of the interior cooler and shelving in the proposed transparency approach. I should also mention, I realize that the applicant is also proposing on the interior side shelving that includes some transparent panels. And I'll let the applicant talk about that as well. Do you have any questions for me?
Thanks, Elizabeth. On page 110, it shows the front elevation, and the majority of the front windows are grayed out, it looks like. How are those treated in your calculations for transparency, and what would the requirements be?
You're talking about this elevation?
No, there's actually an actual picture that was then edited to have some illustration over it. It demonstrates where the sign would be.
Oh, that was not, so these were the elevations on the screen here. These were the elevations that were proposed. I did not utilize that as to determine transparency.
Okay. I'll have the applicant address that. Yep, that one.
Yep. And, right, I assumed that this was simply so that what's actually in the windows wouldn't show in the photos. There's probably furniture or something in these photos because it was a furniture store. So I'll defer to the applicant to talk about that.
All right, any other questions for staff at this time?
Yeah, you said that it was reviewed by the SEPTED folks. Did they have any issues with anything at this point other than the kind of the transparency
No.
things we're talking about? Or?
No, I mean, there will be, it is visible, the store is visible from the outside. There's no clutter on the outside. The front door is visible. There will be security cameras. They have a robust security and training plan. And it will be well lit. So it appears to meet the SEPTED requirements.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thanks, Elizabeth. I'll invite the applicant up if there's additional details you would like to share with us.
My name is Vic Singh, and I am the applicant for this project. I believe you guys will have quite a few questions. I'll refer back to the windows on slide 110. That was done so those for sale signs were just grayed out. So there's no covering of the windows or any film of any sort that's going to go up. As far as the, is there a pointer or something? You can use the mouse. Okay, thank you. Okay, as going back to the site layout, we proposed adding windows to the northeastern corner, so you can see into the cooler, see into the beer cave, eliminating shelving so there's nothing there. As far as the trailer in the back, that can be removed. I know that's not in accordance with zoning. The shared sign program I was not aware of. We were going to use just the one pylon that comes with the building. And then there is a neighboring store, B&B, which is under contract by my father-in-law right now, and he proposes moving that. So he is 100% going to move that as part of, I would not want to compete with my father-in-law. I don't think that's very smart of me or him. I'll answer questions, whatever you guys may have, and hopefully we can get them figured out.
So the neighboring store won't be there?
No.
Okay.
There's a store that was by him, Big Man's on Fulton, which I'm moving here, which was in competition with his store, Grapevine. So it's kind of a trade-off. We never even talked about it until dinner one night. We found out we're kind of helping each other out.
Okay, so you can confirm that you don't have plans to cover those windows?
Yeah, no, I have no plans to cover those windows. Elizabeth addressed that, and I changed the layout to reflect that as well too. That's why there's highlighted wording there. So if there is shelving that's in front of the windows towards the west side, which is in the alleyway, we'll make sure it's limited to 4 feet. I want to make sure there's enough transparency into the building, especially being on a corner like that. There's over 50,000 cars that go through that intersection every day. So I want to capitalize on that, the ability to have customers view in and see an open place and make it feel welcomed.
All right, any other questions for the applicant?
So pardon my slowness here, but so just to clarify, all windows that are currently in place would remain open and visible into the store? And that you would adjust the interior furniture fixtures to be lower than the 4 feet, is what you're saying?
Correct. And part of this, I'm not sure if you saw towards the end of this packet, I am open to, if the city feels there's too many windows, I'm open to closing some off, but that's totally on you guys. And if that's an option, I'll be for it, whatever you guys want to see.
Well, I don't think we'd want to close the windows, but if you were going to put product in front of it, based on the location and the amount of transparency, I think at least Elizabeth and I were of the opinion that rather than having the clear displays to be able to see into the display, because it would be, I think, a little more cluttered, that we'd rather see the use of some spandrel glass or something like that to create a more solid, uniformed architecture.
If that's what you guys want to see, then we'll do that.
But I think, that's a planning commission decision. That was where Elizabeth and I landed on the proposal. If there's no furniture in front of the windows, perfect. But if there is going to be furniture, cabinets or coolers in front, then we would rather see limited use of the spandrel glass, still requiring full transparency requirement be met, but the use of spandrel versus the clear cooler systems.
That's okay with me if that's one of the conditions, and I'm not too familiar with spandrel glass, but if it's, as long as it's some type of glass, translucent, or it's opaque.
No, spandrel glass would be an opaque,
Opaque, okay,
like black plastic, basically.
okay.
Vic, could you talk a little bit more about what your plan is for this?
Yep. Initially, so on the northeastern corner, the northeastern corner of the building where the glass is and the beer cave is, we proposed adding just a glass like this into the cooler panel, so it wouldn't be a gray panel in front of the window and everything blocked out. You would actually be able to see into the cooler, see people walking in, and yes, you would see product that's set on the shelves. So that was one option, where instead of spandrel, we could add insulated glass panels to the inside of the cooler panels, and it would not be blocking the visibility into the building and into the cooler itself. But then again, it would advertise, you would see product on shelving and stacks of beer inside the cooler set further back.
And Vic, the window openings in the cooler would not necessarily be the same size as the outside windows, correct?
They could be made to reflect, basically, if you wanted an 8x8 or 10x10 insulated glass panel, you could insert those into there.
And what will it be like at the top?
You would see a 6-inch gray metal from the top of the cooler, and then it would just be pretty much sealing like this. So I think, going back, I think the spandrel would be a better option if this is too much visibility into that part of the building.
I don't know if I have a real strong opinion on it without being able to see it, but I guess I'd trust the staff's opinion on what would be the best. Obviously, it'd be nice to be able to see into the store on both sides here, especially that being the main corner.
something to discuss after.
And there is a lot of glass there just because there was a furniture showroom. They wanted to advertise what they had on the inside, big pieces, and it was a showroom. It has been kind of closed for the last 3 years. They've just been using it as people call in and make appointments. This is Juan Davis. He's a contractor, and he's helped me through this process.
My name is Juan Davis. I put together those drawings for you. In the way that Vic and I were talking when we get the walk-in cooler, right now is like a window shopping from people that goes by at the car. So when they stop at the traffic light, they can see inside right now for those furnitures. What could happen is we change the furniture for shelving. The product still will be product to be selling inside. So in that way, we can have the cooler panel could be until 8 foot high, but could be also glass behind the glass. So that they will be able to see from the traffic light that they are sitting, waiting for the red light to go to green, they will be able to look even inside to the cooler. Will be the advantage to have the glass panel instead to the dense glass, because the dense glass will be opaque, but it will be considered like portion of the building, architectural portion. But actually, everything will be, people will see glass, but they won't be they will see the material of glass, but they won't be able to see inside. So it will be the rock of the egg. Whatever you decided, I told Vic, let them to decide it. We can do A or B. I'm gonna point also, actually the lack of landscaping in that area is kind of hard to bring a new landscaping because everything is paved. Matter of fact, for the car to do the maneuver, it's kind of tight. We wish to have more parking area because we want more people come and park. But the only way that we can provide some landscaping will be setting some planter in small corners to see something green. But there is not too much area that we can have grass that have mold and something like that. And because this building has been in that corner for a long time, people recognize this building like a Israel furniture. The only difference, it will be that gonna be different kind of business. But landscaping, although it's kind of old, the regulation was different at that time. Landscaping and lighting, we can accommodate that according to the need. Thank you.
All right, commissioners, any other questions for the applicant at this point?
No, not the applicant. I just had a question for staff about the glass behind the glass, and from a SEPTED perspective, if we had concerns about that, other than just the aesthetics of the look of clutter of having product there. Is staff's concern more around just the way it looks, or are you concerned with exactly what the applicant's trying to accomplish, which is to have people see the product?
Yeah, for us, it was more of an aesthetic issue than a crime prevention issue. And I think if Elizabeth wants to maybe get up and restate which windows we're talking about, maybe that will help mitigate some of the concerns and help us arrive at a conclusion here.
All these tall people. Okay, so the front of the building, they're proposing to have, everything would be maintained clear as it is, correct? Correct. Okay, and over on the window that I'm circling now, they're proposing, no changes there. You'd be able to see in there. The cooler, the walk-in cooler would not impair this window at all.
Which is the east elevation and the window at the northeast corner. For Carol.
Thank you. And then the other two easterly windows, those are the ones that would be where the walk-in cooler would be located. So these are the two windows that are in question about the treatment there. Whether we want to have some kind of walk-in cooler with windows, or whether we want those windows to be covered with spandrel glass. I should also add, they're not looking at closing or covering up the windows on the westerly elevation. And here at the corner of the building, the northwest corner is where the cash register will be located. Is that correct?
So right now, it sounds like the applicant is open. Looks like their packet is leaning towards more transparency, which would allow visibility and product display in the windows. If the Planning Commission is comfortable with that, given the limited nature, that's fine. We were just a little bit concerned about, the clutter and such, given the amount of transparency that's already there. The spandrel glass could mitigate for that. But again, that's a Planning Commission decision, and we'll support whichever you decide.
Elizabeth, to clarify, you said that what would it be, the southern two windows on the east facade would be impacted, but the northern set there would not be impacted?
That's correct.
Even though the floor plan shows that the walk-in is the whole elevation, more or less.
There just won't be any product placement directly behind that window.
Well, there wouldn't be shelves placed there as proposed.
Correct. It would be lower than the window.
Right.
Yeah,
But the walk-in would still be there.
The walk-in, you're right, the walk-in would be there, so that would be impacted.
Right.
My apologies. You're correct.
Because it doesn't make sense to have a 500 square foot section of the walk-in without any product. So something will end up there.
You're right.
But
As you notice, the floor plan, the northeast window doesn't have a shelf in front of the window. This is in that portion. There is no shelf in front of the window. The shelves are, like how you mentioned, the other two windows, which will be lower, that doesn't look all the clutter inside.
They would be 4 feet, so you could still see everyone's torso.
so how would you use that front corner then in operation? Would you just have stacks?
No, I would not place any, I'm sorry. No, as it's shown, nothing would be placed in front of those windows. So we're not going to put stacks there to block your view or stack up stuff, so, you're unable to look in. If there is stacks, they'll be more so towards the center of the cooler or along these walls right here. So nothing stacked up against these windows. And these windows, just for clarification, these shelves here, it's written in there too, they're limited to 4 feet. So any perimeter shelving limited to 4 feet.
Okay. All right, any other questions for the applicant at this point? We still need to do a public hearing, so, all right, we'll do that. Thanks. I'll open up the public hearing. If you're here today about this case, please come forward, state your name, and share your brief thoughts with us. I'll close the public hearing. Commissioners?
Yeah, I'm wondering if there's like a happy medium with the shelving. So I understand and agree that we don't want to have a bunch of shelving in front of windows that creates kind of a cluttery view, but I also don't know that it's necessary to cover up the entire window, especially if there's only going to be 4 feet of shelving in front of some of these windows. Like maybe there's like part of the window has, I don't know, I'm not an architect, but.
I'd be inclined to have at least those 2 sets of windows on the east facade
All the way.
done with spandrel. Yeah, I think it'd look odd to have it partially covered or not. And thinking of, I don't know which store it is, there's on Leonard and Monroe, if it's a Family Dollar or something, you can basically see the back of display shelves and from the street, it's just not that appealing. Even if they're lower, these windows go quite low.
Yeah.
And with all of the other transparency there.
I'm rather ambivalent one way or another, but first of all, I want to support this project and say how excited it is to see something going into this building which has been vacant, in particular to see a liquor store that is so open. Often they're pretty closed up. As far as from what I understand, that as part of their whole marketing scheme, that the idea of coolers is not, to me, as offensive as stacks or shelves. The cooler in itself is and I think you said be transparent on both sides, is a very clean-looking, in my opinion, type of shelving system, and allows for this incredibly heavy trafficked site to have a view into that. So, I'm inclined to let them do what they think is best.
I too am in support of the use in this location. As far as the transparency goes, I think what we're concerned about is that it would be poorly done and detract from the nice architecture, right? And so I'm comfortable with and I prefer to not use spandrel glass. I think that's a last resort. I think if it can be done well with glass on glass and appropriate use of product, I think that would be better. I think that we could ask them to do some more work to demonstrate exactly the construction to convince staff that would have that effect without detracting from the architecture. But having said all that, I don't think the spandrel glass would be bad either. It could be supportive either way.
I think that front, as long as that front window that people walking by, you can still glance in there and see what's in there. So there is some sort of visual access to that cooler, but also putting that spindle glass just on the back where it also opens up your ability to use that space with the stacks and shelving in front of that space, and then that way it doesn't take away from that, the accessibility, I guess, is. I mean, I appreciate that you want people to see what your product is, but by leaving that, maybe just that first front window where you can glance through and see that there is a cooler in there and see some of the product, it might be a good way to meet in the middle.
Yeah, I don't have a strong point of view here. I think it's in the applicant's best interest to make the product look appealing the way that they have articulated it. If staff doesn't have a safety or SEPTED concern by having the product there, then I don't have a concern with it. I think it will be difficult for us to sort of micromanage we want to see one more plan about exactly how you're going to implement. I do think realistically, you're not going to get a lot of people in cars seeing the product, but it's your business plan, not mine. So I'm in favor of the application. I think in terms of the overall use, this is a highly trafficked area. Staff acknowledged some of the other alcohol uses in the vicinity, but I still think that this is appropriate given its location. Appreciate the desire to maintain the beauty of the existing building, and I'm supportive of the applicant as is.
All right. Would someone be willing to make a motion?
I could do it. Whereas Total Liquor LLC, Vixing, has requested special land use approval to sell wine, beer, and distilled spirits for off-site consumption in association with a proposed convenience store at 2340 28th Street Southeast, and whereas the proposed use is subject to the requirements for mixed-use commercial zone districts, alcohol sales, standards for site review, and special land use, whereas the Planning Commission held a public hearing on July 14, 2022, at which time all interested persons had an opportunity to be heard, and whereas the Planning Commission has considered the applicable zoning ordinance standards and requirements, now therefore be it resolved that the Planning Commission approves the special land use request of Total Liquor LLC, Vixing, for special land use approval to sell wine, beer, and distilled spirits for the off-site consumption in association with a proposed convenience store at 2340 28th Street Southeast for the following reasons. 1, the proposed use will be consistent with the purpose and intent of the master plan and zoning ordinance, including the zone district, because the proposed use will enhance the character of the neighborhood, the character of the neighborhood because the use will occupy a vacant building and support the vitality of the business district and foster a strong economy. The proposed use will meet the site plan review standards of sections 5.12.08.e because the property will be brought into conformance with all site improvement provisions of the zoning ordinance relative and proportionate to the extent of redevelopment. 3A, the proposed use will be compatible, harmonious, and appropriate with the character and uses of the neighborhood, adjacent properties, and the natural environment because it remains an existing commercial use in a commercial zone district. 3B, the proposed use will not have adverse effects on the neighborhood because the building and entrances will be appropriately oriented. Adequate parking is being provided. The site is not located in close proximity to residential uses. The proposed use will not be detrimental, hazardous, or disturbing to existing or future uses or to the public welfare by reason of excessive traffic, noise, smoke, odors, glare, and visual clutter because no concerns have been expressed by members of the public about the proposed use. 3D, the proposed use will not adversely affect the walkability of the neighborhood, impair pedestrian circulation patterns, disrupt the continuity of the urban street wall, or otherwise hinder the creation of a pedestrian-oriented environment because adequate transparency will be provided. The building and site layout are not proposed to change. 5A, the proposed use will safeguard the health, safety, and general welfare of the public because the site is currently improved with public infrastructure and the addition of alcohol sales will utilize existing sales area within the store. The proposed use will not be detrimental to the financial stability or economic welfare of the city because the use is not anticipated to result in nuisances that require code enforcement actions. And the proposed redevelopment will enhance the viability of the business district in which it is located. Given the character, location, development trends, and other aspects of the neighborhood, it is demonstrated that the area is underserved by the proposed use and that the proposed location for alcohol sales will demonstrably be an asset to the neighborhood because as proposed, the use will be unique as compared to existing uses in the neighborhood due to the size and anticipated selection of product. The use or change in use as constructed and operated by the applicant is compatible with the neighborhood because no concerns have been expressed by members of the public. Adjacent or nearby parks, playgrounds, religious institutions, or schools will not be adversely affected because there are no such uses in the immediate vicinity. The use as proposed to be operated by the applicant will not have any or minimal negative secondary effects on the neighborhood because an adequate operations plan and training will be in place. The use is subject to the cited ordinance. Be it further resolved that the following conditions of approval shall apply to this project. Standard conditions set A approvals as are posted on the screen. Two, that the permanent trash enclosure shall be constructed and placed in accordance with Section 5.2.13 of the zoning ordinance. Number three, that the storage trailer be removed from the site prior to business operations commencing. 4, that the site be closer to conformity with green site element requirements, including greenscape, tree canopy, street trees, and parking and loading area landscape requirements. 5, that the use shall comply with the requirements of the crime prevention through environmental design ordinance. That is the resolution.
Support.
All right, we have motion and support. Was there a desire to have the city staff look at the construction of those windows to ensure that?
Not by me, but I and I've heard differing from each members. Some did care and some didn't.
Okay.
I think some clarity might help our plan reviewer, though. So the coolers can be in front of the window, but it needs to be perfectly clear. Anything that's in front of the window needs to be perfectly clear. So there can't be no part of the cooler can actually be visible in front of a window.
Would that then require a sixth, that to be communicated in the resolution?
I think that would be helpful. And if you could also add lighting to number 4.
Okay. So I am willing to amend adding lighting to the other requirements cited in number 4. And number 6, that coolers that are in front of windows would have glass on both sides. That's my untechnical way of describing it, if you have any better way of doing that.
So is it that the frame of the cooler aligns with the openings of the window so that what's behind visible matches visible? So I think it's the alignment of the frames of the cooler with the frames of the windows.
Number 6, that the frames of the coolers align with the frames of the windows.
That's still support. It's fine.
Okay, anything else? All those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? All right, the motion passes. Thank you. Our next case is 2706 and 2750 Burton Street Southeast.
Okay, so our next case, the Roman Catholic Diocese of Grand Rapids intends to renovate 2706 Burton Street Southeast to operate an early child care center and educational facility as an accessory use to St. Paul the Apostle Church and School at 2750 Burton Street Southeast. Additionally, St. Paul's proposes some additional expansion of their existing building. Religious and educational institutions and their expansion both require special land use approval in the MCN LDR zone district. The surrounding zoning and land uses are predominantly low-density residential, with the exception of a nearby parcel just to the east of the subject property, which is Zagman's Memorial Chapel, which is located in a special district. This Memorial Chapel also provided support for this project and have indicated ingress, egress, as well as parking agreements with St. Paul the Apostle Church. In terms of existing site information, the two properties, so this property here is the current existing property. This quadrant up to the northwest is the subject property. Those will be combined. The parish is currently utilizing some temporary structures to facilitate the childcare and educational uses here. There are just over 300 students ranging from early childhood to 8th grade that are currently enrolled in the school. And at full capacity, the programs would be able to serve no more than 340 students, which is a 36-person difference from what currently exists. Programming runs Monday through Friday, 7 a.m. to 5:30 p.m. year-round. The scope of the project consists of renovation of the former Hope Network-owned building here in the top quadrant, where office, classroom, and childcare spaces will be constructed, as well as a vestibule which will be added to the entrance, which I'll go over in just a moment. As you can see, this is the current configuration of parking, as well as what is existing here to the east. The applicant has indicated removing the third ingress egress from Burton Street here to facilitate an easier traffic flow from these two ingress egress options. Down here, you'll notice another access way, and that comes from the Zagman's Memorial Church parcel that I spoke of earlier. So on the existing building here to the south, they're proposing parish and office additions and renovations of just over 5,300 square feet. They are proposing to relocate an existing pantry of 680 square feet, which used to be situated approximately here, and that is to help make room for the reconfiguration of the parking area. And here you'll see the 80 square foot vestibule addition. This is to help form an entrance for the drop-off and pickup area for the early childhood center. They've also indicated adding a few play areas here, which will be buffered by a 6-foot-tall privacy fence, as well as some landscaping of 7 feet to buffer from the parking area. Here is a closer look at the existing building renovations that will take place. As you can see in the yellow here is what is existing now. They would like to renovate that space, and the blue is what is being proposed as an addition, which really just consists of a break room, office space, and a few other smaller office spaces. Here we'll see that small vestibule for drop-off and pickup, which is going to be added to the new space, as well as an overall renovation of the entire existing building. And here is just a diagram showing the various drop-off or pickup locations. So when vehicles are entering the site, if they have an early childhood drop-off, that would be located just south of the existing building here. The K through 5th grade students would be dropped off here off of the new addition to the parish building, and the 6th through 8th graders would be dropped off on the east side of the building. So they've done a good job at making sure the traffic circulation is evenly dispersed throughout the site to help mitigate possible congestion when picking up your kids. Considering all the uses on the site, the general parking requirement is around 200 to 220 spaces if we consider church assembly, educational use, as well as childcare uses. So even with this reconfiguration, they are still well within the parking requirement, also with the help of the neighboring parcel to have any additional parking they may need. The applicant has also indicated that they've communicated with adjacent members and parish members over the past year to start some talks for fundraising to facilitate this project. The key considerations, to summarize, would be the renovation of the former building in the northwest quadrant to facilitate the Child Care Center and Education Center, the 2,700 addition off of the existing church, and the relocation of the pantry. Do you have any questions for me?
Thanks, Sarah. Any questions? All right, thank you. I'll invite the applicant up if there are other details you would like to share with us.
Hello, I am Kristen Williams with AMDG Architects. We're the architect of record for the project.
My name is Michelle Morrow. I'm the principal at St. Paul the Apostle.
And I'm Jim Rabo. I'm the chair of the school board at St. Paul the Apostle. I'm also counsel for the Diocese of Grand Rapids.
So just a few additional details that we'd like to add. We are looking to shift this early childhood use from the existing parish and school building at 2750 to this new building at 2706, previously occupied by Hope Network. It was mentioned that this use is currently in temporary structures, so looking to add space to accommodate, add permanent space to accommodate. We did contact neighbors within 500 feet of the property, and on May 4th held a neighborhood meeting and went through our plans for the project. The primary concern was stormwater, and the planned improvements would not materially increase the number of square feet of improved space, only approximately 100 square feet of net additional improved space. So this proposal would improve on the site stormwater management, adding approximately 3,000 square feet of additional impervious area on the property. And the on-site stormwater facilities will be enhanced subject to a LUDS permit to address this additional impervious area and to better manage the stormwater on the site. We also were thoughtful about sound, leaving the existing landscaping in place along that western side, as you see on the screen. And have proposed a 6-foot tall solid privacy fence along that shared property line. We would like to note that the early childhood drop-off area, parents would be parking in that area to walk their children in, as this building would accommodate ages 1 through 5. So there would not be a continuous stream of cars going past. It would be a park and drop-off situation there. And also currently do have some parking in that area currently. Are there any additional questions from the council?
Commissioners, any questions?
I just have one. So I appreciate you mentioning that you're keeping all that mature landscaping that exists between your property there and the property to the west. Thank you. I'm wondering, with the fence going directly through that, I just want to make sure you'll be able to maintain all the trees that are existing there. Even though you're constructing a new fence in the middle.
That is the intent, that any of the vegetation that's on our property would be maintained.
Okay, yeah. And I guess you would have to work with the neighbor related to overhangs and make sure you're not cutting down their trees either. Okay, thanks.
I I'd like to make just one point on the stormwater as well. This project is only really impacting that west part of the site, and the stormwater there generally flows in that direction. It doesn't flow to the south, and the design plan here is to capture all of the additional stormwater that might be generated from the additional impervious and take it to the drainage area to the north of the Hope Network property. So we're planning to gather that in, and I guess the good news is because we're removing some parking and maneuvering area as well, there's only a net increase of impervious of 3,000 square feet. So it's not a lot of additional impervious, and we're going to be very careful about how we gather that stormwater in and deal with it. And of course, it's all subject to, permitting, LUDs and everything like that, so.
Anything else, commissioners? All right, thank you. I'll open up the public hearing. If you're here today about this case, please come forward, state your name, and share your brief thoughts with us. Yes.
Yep. Hello, my name is Andrea Photius, and I'm the neighbor to the west. So my family has owned this property since 1946, so we've been there over 75 years. The property runs 200 feet across Burton and then 430 feet back. So we go as far back as the rectory that you see in the drawings in this. And so I did attend the May 4th meeting that they were talking about. And my understanding is that there was going to be a traffic flow coming in here and then going around and coming out. All right, so that's what was described in the material that the guy from the architecture team showed us. And he had arrows and everything going that they drive around like this and come out. The question that I have here is that when you get down to this area down here, it's confusing as to, do they go to the elementary drop-off or not, or do they come across here? And I can just see this as a traffic jam happening around here. To me, it looks dangerous. It looks complicated and dangerous how they're going about in here. They said right now at the meeting or in the material too that there's 73 children in the daycare and 167 in elementary. So that is 240 students. So I'm assuming close to 150 cars are going to be entering here every morning and also at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, dropping off their kids and picking them up. And so from my perspective, I've got all the noise from the cars. I got all these car doors opening and closing. I have all the pollution coming my way. I have headlights coming my way. My privacy is in jeopardy, and also my security. In addition, with all this that they're doing here, they're removing all the green space that's over on this side. You know, the property, the Hope Network property is 200 feet across, I think, or no, 165 feet across and 200 feet deep. Well, 165 across all the way back to like Priest's house, all that green space is gone now. And they're filling it up with parking spaces. Okay? And so also in the site plan, they said that there's only 5 feet here. Well, to me, they say they're just building a parking lot. Well, to me, they're building a private road. And if you look at offset requirements for a private road, they're violating those offset requirements. So in my opinion, they're violating that. Let's see, what else did I want to say? Oh, and also, oops, I went back too far. Oop. There we go.
All right, your time is up.
Time up, okay. And I just wanted to say too, one thing that I like though, that they are addressing the stormwater. I think that's wonderful. I think it's great. And they have been great neighbors all through the years. They have. I really don't have a complaint, you know, so they have been great neighbors. So, but that's my concern.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks. All right, anyone else? Did you have any comments you wanted to make, sir? I'm sorry? Did you have any comments you wanted to make? Yes. Okay, go ahead.
I've lived behind the church for over 35 years, and this past, excuse me, April and May, when we had all that rain, I spent 100 hours, over 100 hours, with 2 pumps pumping out. I have a gully back there, which when I moved in, I was told that was a natural waterway. And with this new addition to the southwest, with the increase of parking space, yes, that water is going to go to the west, but it's also going to go to the south. And I have a real concern after what I went through this past spring, and would like to know with this 5,350 square feet, what's going to be done? They talked about the west and some water, catching sewer water or whatever. But I went to the meeting they had. There was never any talk about the properties to the south. And we're a row going across our back fence of 6 houses. And I know for a fact that the houses on each side of me, both were affected by this runoff from the schoolyard this last spring. I've had water before, but nothing like this. And I mean, I've had to use my pumps, but nothing like this last one. And now by adding more structure to that property, I'm not an engineer. I don't have any training in any of this architecture stuff. But I think common sense says the water's not going to be going right down in the ground with all this additional parking space and increasing the size of this construction on the school building. And I have a neighbor who is an engineer, and he said that the city and your preparation for this, I guess you look into this water stuff. Part of my question is, did the city do their due diligence, and what's going to happen with this water issue?
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right. I will close the public hearing. You can go ahead and come up, and if you want to address anything. Otherwise, I think staff can talk about the water.
I just
as
wanted
well.
to make a couple comments and appreciate, and we love our neighbors, and I think the whole purpose, the business plan of St. Paul the Apostle is to be good neighbors, so we don't want to do anything that's going to harm any of our neighbors. I would just ask the Planning Commission to review the traffic report that we submitted. We don't believe that this project that we're suggesting is going to materially add traffic to the site. So, and we're not looking to make a major growth to the school or the early childhood plan. We're really just trying to accommodate the cars, the pollution that's already coming on to the site. With respect to the stormwater, again, we don't believe any of this. Well, first of all, with respect to the amount of improvements, we're demolishing a significant number of square feet of improvements as well. When you take into account the existing portion of the old rectory that we're taking down and the garage, I think it's approximately 100 square feet of additional improvements. So we're not really building 5,000. We are building 5,000 new square feet, but net it's much, much less. So there's not going to be a lot of additional new space. And same thing with the impervious. For the creation of new stormwater that has to be managed, we're removing some existing, putting some additional in. At the end of the day, we're ending up with the same number of parking spaces. And then we're going to be very, very careful about how we manage that stormwater because we don't want to increase, anyone's burden. With respect to the south of the campus, which is really not the subject of this application, I would just point out that there's a natural flow of the water back there. There's a lot of green space behind the school, and we're not disagreeing that there aren't any water issues, but they're not impacted by this project, and I don't think the scope of this matter. So, thank you.
Kristen or some staff, could you talk about what the city does in terms of due diligence on engineering and water?
Yes, so any plan that is created that would either improve upon or increase or affect a site layout, the part of the LUD's permit process is that the applicant's engineer is required to submit construction drawings, both to indicate what the stormwater management system would be, as well as soil erosion control, and that's specific relative to the areas being affected, so the areas of what we would call areas of improvement. And so this planning commission's scope of authority is contained to was the use appropriate. Now, certainly general site layout, traffic flow, traffic impacts are all relative, but specific to the stormwater, much of that authority is relegated to our city stormwater engineer. And so, again, we would require full construction drawings that indicate what stormwater management systems will be necessary and in place. They would have to meet city code as well as the state requirements. I do know that those have increased. I believe it was July 1st. Our stormwater engineer could speak to the technicalities of that, but there is a fairly robust management system that is required of the applicant and of the applicant's engineer to provide those drawings to make sure that any increase in impervious surface, that stormwater must be captured and treated before it is allowed to go into the city's system. Regarding traffic, there was a traffic analysis that was completed by Progressive, and the city's traffic engineer did review that, and it found that there was not a need to the increase or any increase in the number of vehicle trips associated with this modification or this change in use did not warrant a full-blown traffic study. So effectively, the city's traffic engineer did concur with the analysis that was prepared by another traffic engineer through Progressive Engineering. The city's requirements for the offsets that was mentioned relative to private roads. Although this, from our definitions, is defined as a drive aisle or a lane. It does certainly serve as drop-off, but it is internal to the parking lot. And so both planning and the traffic safety department would review that circulation pattern, and based on the review of the plans that have been submitted thus far, meaning there would be an additional set during the construction permitting process, we do not find that the proposed layout would not comply with any of our current requirements. And part of those requirements, of course, look at the health, safety, and welfare of the users and the surrounding area. Relative to the green space, certainly there is an increase in impervious surface that was disclosed or noted on the plans. It is below the amount of green space that is, let me rephrase that, the amount of green space that remains, although there is a reduction in green space, still exceeds the city's minimum green space requirement for this district. And so although we're seeing a bit of a loss in green space, it's not a loss that would put it below the requirements of the city's landscape ordinance. And I believe I hit all of those requirements. We did, when I met in some of the early meetings with the applicant, we did, traffic is one of those issues that does routinely come up with any sort of institutional use, daycare, schools, et cetera. So that was one of the reasons why we had the need for the traffic analysis, to make sure that there was no detriment associated with the increase in the drop-offs, that the site and the adjacent infrastructure, the adjacent roadways, could handle any increase that would result from this plan. And we also talked quite a bit about the hours of drop-off associated with a childcare are typically not always identical with the hours of a school. So certainly school specifically, there is a fairly robust drop-off and pickup time because parents converge all at the same time. I believe the school does have a staggered start and finish time associated with the varying grade levels. And the Child Care Institute also, parents, because of schedules and such, also has a fairly staggered drop-off time. So based on that information that was provided, it does feel both planning department as well as traffic safety felt that the internal circulation plan and the extent of the drive aisles that are internal to the site and being accessed from a high-volume street, that we felt that it could more than handle the drop-off and the queuing lanes and times that were being proposed.
Can you speak to the setback requirements for the parking lot? And is that being reduced because of the fence? It mentions a buffer zone reduction credit with the fence.
Yeah, I'll let Sarah correct me if I've misspoken, but there is a buffer requirement. So there's a setback requirement for a parking area, but that will oftentimes be required to increase depending on the nature of the uses that are being proposed and or abutting. And so I believe in this case, it would be a 10-foot buffer requirement, a 5-foot setback, but because it's adjacent residential, we increase that setback to 10 feet. The ordinance does allow for a reduction of that 10-foot where a solid fence is proposed. That is something that the Planning Commission can consider. You may determine that it's not appropriate for a reduction to that 10-foot, in which case the applicant, through permitting, if approved, would have to then modify their plans and likely shift things a little bit to the, what would that be, the east. So that's one of those decision points for the Planning Commission to consider whether a reduction to that required landscape buffer is necessary or appropriate.
Yeah, I just think considering the proximity of the residential parcel next door and the large parking lot and the amount of traffic that will be circulating right around that edge of the parking lot, it might be something that we consider. Other discussion or any questions, final questions for the applicant? Go ahead.
Kristen, to go further on the traffic question, and this isn't specific to this project, but the racetrack that we call Burton, does the city have any plans that you're aware of to do any other traffic calming measures there? I know a lot was done further down Burton, but not for this stretch. And I appreciate that a curb cut will be going away, which tends to increase safety, but it also probably increases speed even further.
Yeah, we're not aware of any improvements that are planned for that section of Burton Street. And I concur, that was one of my early comments in this proposal was, getting rid of that secondary access drive to mitigate the potential for drop-off to take place in front of the building. I thought it was far too intense of use to have drop-off potential there, that we needed to bring it internal to the site.
I guess it doesn't sound like there's a lot of added traffic. It's just redirecting it in ways, and I'm glad you made the point. I was thinking that the daycare hours and the school hours are typically different. Daycare goes from 7:30 to 5:30 or 6, school's 8 to 3, so that helps stagger it, but you're not adding a whole lot in doing that. So I think that I'm supportive of the new configuration and the drainage, and I'm secure the city will monitor that and make sure it's appropriately constructed.
Any other discussion?
Just on that west wall, we were talking about the appropriate distance. So, just a question for staff. Is the proposal less than the 10-foot requirement because they had the 6-foot fence proposed? And if so, can you articulate exactly what that buffer is? Or that space, maybe buffer's the wrong word.
Yep, so 10-foot landscape buffer, and there's a minimum number of trees and shrubs that would be required within that buffer zone, is the requirement. However, the ordinance does allow for a departure, which again is permissive. It allows for a departure of that distance when a solid 6-foot fence is provided. So it's really shrinking the buffer, in this case, from 10 feet to, at its shortest or least width would be 5'3" and 5'3".
Okay.
5.3.
So that was
sorry.
my question. So the proposal is to shrink it to 5.3 at its most narrow point.
Yes.
So I guess the question for the applicant would be the flexibility to comply with the standard, which would be 10 feet, given the proximity to, and the testimony we heard during the open meeting, or during the public comment, whether or not that's something that new parking space could accommodate. So that was a question for the applicant.
Yeah, I would have to take that back to my team, but I think, if that's the decision of the commission, then we certainly can go back and take a look at that piece.
Okay, thanks.
Just a question that would.
It looks like there are some easy wins. The parking space width that's being proposed are 9.5 feet. The ordinance requires 9. And so if you add that out to all the spaces, I think that there's some easy wins based on the design that could easily make up that additional 4 feet-ish without losing the number of new parking spaces.
Okay.
Can I just ask a question? So if we change to 10 feet, does that mean we don't have to put the fence in as well? Or are you asking for the setback and the fence?
So unless otherwise required by the Planning Commission to buffer the use, you would not be required to install a fence.
I think we may be inclined to still require. I think we may be inclined to still require that.
The ordinance wouldn't be required unless the Planning Commission found that it was a mitigation measure necessary for the intensity of the use. So you could still require the fence without allowing the reduction.
Okay, I just want to make one more comment about what that drop-off is going to be like in front of the early childhood. It is really different from, say, the middle school drop-off where, your parents will bring their children in, they throw open the passenger door, the kids jump out when the car's going 3 miles an hour, and the parents peel out of there, right? So the early childhood, you can't do that because the kids are so little. So the parents typically will park their cars and in the park and then walk their children in. So it's not going to have the feeling of like a steady drop off. It'll be much more, I think it'll be much more gentle too as well. So that's just.
Do the elementary parents not cycle around that parking lot to the west and then back to the east, though?
Yeah, if I can. Currently, they come in and they make a cut through here. We have, currently this doesn't exist, so they're all
Right.
over here and they go across the front. When and if we do redo this front office space, because right now all of our entry is over on this side of the building. So if this front office space was redone and we moved the school offices here, we would likely still have them, these guys are parking and have a cut through at that 8 o'clock, so it's 7:45 to about 8 o'clock in the morning, and they circle through here. This is entrance only, exit only, to get people moving through.
So they would cut across parking spaces?
So we block these off and make a kind of a cut through here to avoid the long twist.
Okay.
Yeah. So
Interesting.
lots of cones.
I'm not a traffic engineer, but I played one on TV. I actually think it makes a hell of a lot more sense for you to, to cue them around as the chair was kind of talking about. But, I didn't look carefully at the traffic evaluation within the application, but nonetheless, I still think that there's an intensity of traffic use regardless of whether it's a parking or a drop-off situation that would inspire me to require the applicant to comply with the 10-foot buffer. I don't necessarily need a fence too, but I do think that compliance with the existing standards because of the proximity to residential at that section is important. And so my follow-up question on that is, on the screen, would the 10-foot buffer be required all the way from Burton to all the way to the south? I know there's no development down there, but would the 10-foot buffer have to go all the way to, say, where the proposed pantry location is?
I think that's up to us.
Yeah, typically we would bring a site up to conformance, which means any area along that linear length that's adjacent to the areas of improvement. So that's really from the back of the existing building, or the back of the existing building towards the pantry, that section would then adhere to the landscape buffer requirements. So we'd retrofit that space. If the Planning Commission desired, you could require that to extend down to Burton Street. That wouldn't be typical from a staff's, past practice from a staff decision-making.
Thanks for the clarity. Yeah, I mean, I don't know, were you asking for more questions or comments or?
No, I guess let's try to solidify what we think there. I'm inclined to do both and, but that's me.
How far would you require the fence?
I think just along where the parking lot is, so from the back of the existing building to the, as shown, to where the back of the pantry is.
Okay. Yeah, I'm fine with that. I mean, if my concern is about the intensity of the use and its impact on the adjacent residential. So I'm not opposed to the belts and suspenders approach.
I agree with, I like your suggestion, Stacy, of adding to the buffer there, but at least in that area, it would seem having a fence would also help to block noise or other lights or things like that.
Okay, any other comments about this or other topics? No, the public hearing has been closed. All right, anything else? Otherwise, it looks like Commissioner Bueller is ready to make a motion.
I don't want to cut off conversation, but I am prepared if everyone else is. All right. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the Planning Commission approves the special land use request of the Roman Catholic Diocese of Grand Rapids, David Welkowiak, I'm so sorry for that, to redevelop and renovate existing structures at 2706 and 2750 Burton Street Southeast to expand the existing religious and educational and institutional use for the following reasons. The proposed use will be consistent with the purpose and intent of the master plan and zoning ordinance, including the zone district, because the proposed use will support and continue a land use that currently exists at this location and is a longstanding institution in the neighborhood. The proposed use would be compatible, harmonious, and appropriate with the existing or planned character and uses of the neighborhood, adjacent properties, and natural environment, because activity associated with the proposed use is not anticipated to impose a burden on other uses within the area, and the proposed use is an expansion of an existing use in the neighborhood. Potentially adverse effects arising from the proposed use in the neighborhood and adjacent properties would be minimized through the provisions of adequate parking, the placement of buildings, structures, and entrances, as well as the location of screening, fencing, and buffering, because an existing vacant building is proposed for adaptation and reuse. Buildings, structures, and entrances allow for appropriate circulation on the site. Adequate parking and drop-off points will be provided for the use, and the reconfiguration of parking spaces allows for more adequate buffering from both the major roadway and adjacent residential uses. The proposed use would not be detrimental, hazardous, or disturbing to existing or future uses or to the public welfare by reason of excessive traffic, noise, smoke, odors, or glare, because parking and vehicular circulation areas will be appropriately screened from the street and residential properties. Traffic's not anticipated to materially change from the existing operation, and landscape buffering and screening from the playground areas to adjacent landscape buffering and screening from the parking and playground areas to adjacent residences have been sufficiently proposed. The proposed use would not adversely affect the walkability of the neighborhood, impair pedestrian circulation patterns, disrupt the continuity of the urban street wall, or otherwise hinder the creation of a pedestrian-oriented neighborhood because the existing and proposed buildings are located according to the intent and requirements of the mid-20th century neighborhood designation, and there will be no change to the orientation or placement of the existing buildings on the respective properties, maintaining the established street wall. The building and site area required for the proposed use will retain as many natural features of the landscape as practicable, particularly where the natural features assist in preserving the general character of the neighborhood, because the property will increase landscaping and create new areas of green space so that no significant removal of green space or other natural features will impact the site. Adequate public or private infrastructure and services already do exist or would be provided at no additional cost and will safeguard the health, safety, and general welfare of the public because the site has already been improved with infrastructure and the amount of additional infrastructure needed for the proposed uses is limited. The proposed use will not be detrimental to the financial stability of the economic welfare of the city because the proposed uses are not expected to result in a need for additional emergency services. Be it further resolved that the following conditions of approval shall apply to this project. Standard conditions set A approvals, which will be on the screen momentarily but have been previously read. And 2, that...
Would you like me to read my draft?
Sure.
Okay. That a 10-foot minimum landscape buffer be installed along the west lot line between the south wall of the existing building to the south wall of the new pantry, and further that a 6-foot tall privacy fence be installed along the same line.
Sounds great. And that is my motion.
Support.
All right, we have a motion and support. Any final discussion? All those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? All right, motion passes. Thank you. Our last case today is zoning ordinance amendment. Who's presenting this? You are? All right.
All right, I will remain here unless needed otherwise. But today you have a packet of zoning ordinance text amendments. In terms of their complexities, I think it's relatively minimal, but there are... Oh, sorry. Pause. Oh, there she is. Now we need Commissioner Davis to come back. I don't know, was she? Joseph? I didn't think so either. I think she's went out there to look.
No, nobody move.
Okay. I'm not going to leave the room. I'm just going to...
Are you just running away from me the whole time?
All right, do we have everybody? There we go, okay. So as I was stating, the proposed amendments, I think are relatively simple, although there's several of them and they actually don't relate to one another. There's a couple of buckets that we could look at these through, and one is regarding the lot width and area requirements. The other is uses in the neighborhood office service zone district, and then the final bucket is kind of a two-prong approach relative to the time frame or the number of extensions that a site plan or optional plan review can have. So I'll start with the lot width and area requirements. This should look relatively familiar. You will recall that you recommended approval to support adding an administrative departure to allow for a reduction in the required lot width for single and two-family housing. What that intent was to give staff a little bit more flexibility to allow for that incremental infill of some housing density in our neighborhoods. When we went back and started applying the ordinance, we realized that perhaps we erred in not including a lot area reduction alongside the lot width. And so when you look at what typical lot dimensions are, and you go back to what original plats are, it really perhaps doesn't make sense to allow for a width reduction without an area reduction because of the nature of math. And so we did reorganize this a little bit. So rather than having a section dealing with lot width and a section dealing with lot area that would largely be redundant, we combined it into one section, and it's under the initial heading of lot requirements. And you'll note through the red line version, all of the basis for the departure remain exactly the same. We did have to wordsmith because, to give us that flexibility with lot width and area, but we wanted to make sure that it was, we could allow for a lot width without a lot area because they don't always need to work together. So there was some English major work that Elizabeth had to work on for us. So I think we're in a pretty good space there. Any questions on that amendment? No? Okay.
I do, actually.
Oh, yes.
And maybe I should have brought this up the last time this came forward, but whenever we have vacant lot situations, I want to make sure that we guard against incentivizing demolition by neglect, which leads to vacant lots, which leads to different permissiveness than maintaining a structure, which we would prefer in the first place. Do you believe that this guards against that adequately?
I don't think it makes it worse than what we currently struggle with, if that is any consolation. We do have other applicable building housing codes that try to guard against allowing for the deterioration of housing or buildings generally. I think fortunately right now we're in a market where it makes sense to preserve existing structures because of construction costs, but that's a market-driven force. But I don't believe that these amendments will further the concern that you're referencing. The second item is relative to the NOS district. Through various conversations and conversations with potential applicants, we realized that we had a pretty glaring oversight relative to the types of uses that are allowed in our neighborhood office service district. So when you think about what the purpose and intent of the office service district, I think the name sort of speaks to it, that it's a pretty low intensity office district. Oftentimes we see it serving as a good buffer between residential and more intense commercial uses. It does allow for some residential. It doesn't allow for assembly type uses or I should say retail or like restaurant type uses. However, in the use table, there was a bit of a conflict in that it actually didn't expressly limit alcohol sales for on-premise or off-premise consumption. And when you go to that section in Article 9, it effectively said, well, you can't have a restaurant, but you can have a bar. You can't have a retail establishment, but you can sell alcohol. So it really didn't make a lot of sense. And I think for us, it was concerning that there was really no way for us to limit a bar in that location, that it would be a permitted use. And that really, the logic fails. And so it would be challenging for us to deny an application based on an ordinance logic failure. So we wanted to make sure that we clean that up because I don't think that was the intent of the district or the intent of the city to allow for those types of uses in that district. So you'll note that the additional X's under entertainment and hospitality have been added, and X means it's not permitted, of course. And then there was a bit of just a cleanup item under the alcohol sales for off-premise consumption. Again, we want to make sure that it's clear that we don't allow for that type of use. And then also making sure that it's clear we call out gross floor area, stores that have greater than 25,000 gross floor, but it was silent on what happens if the store is less than that. I think the application of it has been, we allowed it, but we want to make sure that if we're already, opening up this section, that we make it easy for understanding on the public side, but also ease of interpretation and administration on our side. Any questions on that?
We're missing the column heading, so the NOS is the second column from the right.
Oh, I'm sorry. It's actually the, yes, you're right. It's the second to last column
Thank you.
on the right. All right. And then finally, you may recall that we provided the Planning Commission with the flexibility to grant additional extensions on top of the single one-year extension. We were seeing a lot of issues relative, mostly stemming from COVID delays and also availability of contractors and such. What we didn't think about at the time was perhaps we needed a similar extension for site plan and optional plan reviews, which have been also granted both either by the Planning Commission or city staff. So this aligns with the same logic that we applied with the special land use and carries that same logic into other types of use approvals, specifically optional plan review and site plan review. So we think that that made sense to bring forward with this packet of amendments. Any questions on that one? No?
So, Kristen, if I'm reading this right, I thought it was, oh, maybe I don't see it. The site plan review is based on when, you're changing it based on when the applicant gets it into you. Doesn't mean that we're going to take longer to approve it.
That's correct. So if staff or the Planning Commission grants a site plan approval and it varying authorities based on the nature of the application, right now that approval is good for 1 year.
Right.
So this would allow for 2 6-month extensions, so an additional year, 2 6-month extensions of those, the validity of the approval. It does not suggest that we should take more time in the review of it.
I knew that was the case, but
Yes.
just wanted to.
Thank you.
Any other questions at this time? Okay, I'll open up the public hearing. And then I'll close the public hearing. Any discussion?
No,
All makes sense?
I think it all makes sense. Yeah, it cleans up some things and increases consistency and, yeah, I think it all makes sense. I'm willing to make a motion unless other people have comments or discussion.
Okay.
Support.
Go ahead.
Okay. Now therefore be it resolved that the Planning Commission recommends that the City Commission approve the proposed text amendments to the zoning ordinance for the following reasons. The proposed amendments are consistent with the purpose and intent of the master plan and zoning ordinance because the amendments support the 2002 Grand Rapids Master Plan, Chapter 3, Great Neighborhoods, which recommends that housing choices should be made available to people of different ages, ethnicity, and income levels. Neighborhoods should have a particular character and style of housing, and new homes should be built on vacant lots where appropriate. The proposed amendments will enhance the functionality or character of future development in the city because the amendments will provide opportunities for infill development in already developed areas of the city. The proposed amendments will protect the health, safety, and general welfare of the public because the amendments are consistent with the objects of the Grand Rapids Strategic Plan, which support housing objectives of the Grand Rapids Strategic Plan, which support housing development and services that help keep people in their homes and support efforts to ensure all residents have safe, stable, and permanent housing. The amendments will contribute to the efficient use of existing infrastructure. The proposed amendments are needed to correct an error or omission in the original text because alcohol uses were never intended to be permitted in the NOS zone district. And the extensions to site plan review and optional plan review approvals are consistent with the recent amendments for special land use approvals. The proposed amendments will address a community need in physical or economic conditions or development practices because the proposed amendments will help relieve the current lack of housing supply within the city, and pursuant to the Grand Rapids Housing Needs Assessment, the city will need at least 5,300 more rental units more housing units by 2025 to satisfy demand. The proposed amendments would not result in the creation of significant nonconformities in the city because the proposed amendments would not permit creation of nonconforming lots.
Support.
All right, we have a motion and support. Any discussion? Okay, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right, the motion passes. I'll open up the public comment portion of the meeting. Close public comment. Anything else, commissioners? Staff? No? All right, thank you. We're adjourned.